In the annals of history, some chapters remain forgotten, yet their echoes continue to shape our world. Today we unveil one such tale, a clash of empires, a struggle for independence, and a war that defined a nation. In the early morning mist, the echoes of gunfire shattered the serene beauty of the Philippine archipelago. A nation, once under the yoke of Spanish colonial rule, had tasted the bittersweet fruits of freedom, only to find itself plunged into the crucible of a new conflict. This was no ordinary war. It was a clash that would shape the destiny of nations and forever etch its mark on the annals of history. From the tropical jungles of Luzon to the sun-drenched shores of Visayas, a war would bear witness to courage, betrayal, sacrifice, and resilience. Welcome to the untold story of the Philippine-American War, where heroes and villains emerged, and a nation's destiny hung in balance. It was 1521 when Ferdinand Magellan arrived in the Philippine archipelago. Magellan's arrival marked the beginning of an era of Spanish colonization dominating the country, claiming it as their own. They saw the Philippines as a strategic outpost, a gateway to the fabled riches of the East, and sought to exploit its resources to their fullest. This would be considered one of Philippines' nightmare for over 3 centuries. The Spanish influence spread like wildfire, and the colonization machinery took hold. Under Spanish rule, the Philippines became a colony exploited for its resources, primarily agricultural products and precious minerals. Filipinos were subjected to forced labor, heavy taxation, and cultural assimilation. Spanish missionaries, armed with their zeal for conversion, set out to Christianize the native population. Churches, monasteries, and schools sprouted like mushrooms as the friars sought to imprint their faith on the hearts and minds of the Filipinos. The Filipinos' traditional beliefs and practices were suppressed, and they were coerced into adopting Spanish customs and traditions. A growing dissatisfaction simmered among the native inhabitants. The Filipinos, proud of their rich heritage and traditions, bristled under the heavy-handed rule of the Spanish overlords. They saw their land being exploited, their resources plundered, and their rights trampled upon, pushing the Filipinos to the brink of despair. On the other side of the island, the United States, a rising global power, sought to expand its influence beyond its borders. The United States saw economic potential in the Philippines. The island possessed valuable resources and presented a potentially lucrative market for American goods, and with the opening of the Panama Canal on the horizon, the Philippines could serve as a crucial link in trade routes to Asia. Rooted in the belief of manifest destiny and American exceptionalism, some Americans saw their involvement in the Philippines as a moral obligation to spread democracy, freedom, and civilization. They viewed themselves as agents of progress and sought to bring enlightenment to the Filipino people. This perspective drove their sense of duty and their conviction in their mission. On the other side, the Filipino perspective presented a starkly different view. The Filipino people, long oppressed under Spanish rule, saw the war as a fight for their independence and self-determination. They resented foreign control and interference in their affairs, and their primary motivation was to liberate themselves from any form of colonial domination. In the harbor of Havana, Cuba, the USS Maine stood proud, a symbol of American power and presence. The year was 1898, and tensions between the United States and Spain were reaching a boiling point. Little did anyone know that the fate of the USS Maine would ignite a firestorm of conflict and propel the two nations into war. One fateful night, as the moon cast an eerie glow over the harbor, the peace was shattered by a deafening explosion. The USS Maine, rocked by a devastating blast, succumbed to the depths of the sea, taking the lives of many brave sailors with it. The news of the tragedy spread like wildfire, leaving a shocked and grieving nation in its wake. The sinking of the USS Maine was viewed with suspicion, and accusations flew in every direction. As diplomatic negotiations between Spain and United States faltered and tempers flared, war became inevitable. The United States, fueled by a thirst for justice and retribution, made a bold and historic declaration, a declaration of war against Spain. The declaration of war sent shockwaves across the globe, reverberating in the colonial territories of Spain. However, in the Philippines, the news ignited a flicker of hope in the hearts of the Filipino people. For years they had suffered under Spanish oppression, yearning for their freedom. The declaration of war presented an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against their colonial masters and claim their rightful place among the nations of the world. A clandestine alliance was forged, born out of a shared desire for freedom and a burning determination to overthrow the chains of Spanish colonial rule. Emilio Aguinaldo, a resolute Filipino revolutionary, stood at the helm of the uprising against Spanish oppression. But as fate would have it, an unexpected ally would soon appear on the horizon: the United States. Across the vast Pacific, American forces sailed toward the Philippine shores, their intentions shrouded in mystery. The Filipinos eyed the newcomers with suspicion. What did these foreigners seek in their land? Was this an opportunity for liberation, or merely another form of colonial subjugation? With caution, Aguinaldo reached out to the American forces, seeking to uncover their true motives. As the first meeting between Aguinaldo and the American commander unfolded, a delicate dance of diplomacy and negotiation ensued. After a tense moment of contemplation, Colonel Johnson extended his hand, sealing a pact that would forever alter the course of history. The Filipino revolutionaries and the American forces would fight side by side, united in their quest for liberation. With the spirit of camaraderie and a shared objective, the Filipino revolutionaries and the American forces embarked on a campaign of audacious tactics and daring maneuvers. Together, they launched lightning-fast assaults on Spanish garrisons, liberating towns and villages from the grip of oppression. The alliance between the Filipinos and Americans, once a fragile thread, grew stronger with each victory. But amidst the triumphs, whispers of uncertainty loomed on the horizon. Would the alliance endure beyond the downfall of the common foe? What would be the true price of freedom? And how would it shape the destiny of the Philippines? It was the year 1898, and the Treaty of Paris loomed large. A document that would determine the future of the Philippines and plunge it into the clutches of a new master. The voices of diplomats, politicians, and revolutionaries alike reverberated through the air as the news of the transfer of sovereignty from Spain to the United States reached the shores of the Philippine archipelago. The news of the transfer of sovereignty gripped the Filipino people, stirring emotions of confusion, anger, and betrayal. Aguinaldo, the embodiment of their aspirations, gathered his comrades, their faces etched with determination and defiance. He addressed them with fire in his eyes, his voice resolute. "We must fight on," he declared, "for true freedom cannot be dictated by foreign powers." Word of Aguinaldo's rallying cry reached the distant shores of America, where politicians and generals contemplated the implications of the treaty. Battles erupted across the archipelago, skirmishes that would leave scars on the land and souls of those involved. And in the midst of this turmoil, the Treaty of Paris stood as a symbol of shattered dreams and broken promises. The Philippines, once on the grasp of independence, found itself shackled under a new form of colonial rule, its fate determined by distant powers. With the Treaty of Paris in 1898, the Philippines had been ceded from Spanish control to the United States, sparking a glimmer of hope among the Filipinos for independence. However, as American troops set foot on the archipelago, the dream of self-governance started to fade, replaced by a mounting sense of disillusionment and resentment. At first, the Filipinos, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, formed an alliance with the American in their fight for freedom. They believed that the shared experience of overthrowing a colonial power would forge a bond between the two nations. But it was not long before tensions began to simmer beneath the surface. As months passed, the American forces imposed their authority with an iron fist, encroaching upon Filipino territories and undermining their quest for independence. The promises of self-rule made by the United States proved hollow, and the Filipino revolutionaries found themselves trapped in a treacherous dance, torn between their desire for freedom and the realities of an increasingly oppressive occupation. As tensions escalated, both sides engaged in a dangerous dance of espionage and sabotage. Spies infiltrated the ranks of the revolutionaries, sowing seeds of distrust and paranoia. Betrayal and double-crossing became a constant presence, with loyalties shifting like sand in the wind. The American forces, on the other hand, skillfully employed a combination of divide-and-conquer tactics and strategic propaganda to sow discord among the Filipino revolutionaries. They exploited existing fault lines within the movement, exacerbating ideological differences and personal rivalries to weaken their resistance. Caught in this web of deceit, the Filipino revolutionaries grappled with their own internal struggles. It was 1899. The streets of Manila were transformed into a battleground, echoing with the thunderous roar of artillery and the piercing cries of combat. Amidst the smoke and chaos of the Philippine-American War, the echoes of cannon fire and the cries of soldiers filled the air as Filipino revolutionaries and American forces clashed in a struggle for control. Battle of Manila. One of the fiercest battles to ever occur in this period was the Battle of Manila. Filipinos sought to reclaim their city from the American occupiers. Led by General Antonio Luna, a brilliant military tactician, the revolutionaries launched a daring assault on the city, determined to push back the encroaching forces. The Battle of Manila raged where every alley and building became a potential death trap. The revolutionaries employed guerrilla tactics, utilizing their intimate knowledge of the city to their advantage. Ambushes and hit-and-run attacks kept the American forces off balance, inflicting heavy casualties and sowing fear among their ranks. Yet the Americans, under the command of General Arthur MacArthur, were not to be easily defeated. They countered with a relentless campaign, employing superior firepower and advanced military technology. The streets of Manila transformed into a battleground where every step forward was contested fiercely. Amidst the chaos, the Filipinos fought valiantly, their passion for independence fueling their determination. However, despite their tenacity, they were eventually overwhelmed by the might of the American forces. The Battle of Manila ended with the city in ruins, its streets stained with the blood of both revolutionaries and American soldiers. The loss was a significant blow to the Filipino cause, as it signaled a shift in the balance of power. Siege of Bela. The Siege of Bela would become one of the most gripping tales of resilience and survival. In the town of Bela, a few Spanish soldiers found themselves captive by Filipino revolutionaries after the defeat of the Spanish forces. For months on end, the Spanish troops held their ground against overwhelming odds. The men endured starvation, disease, and the constant threat of attack, yet their spirits remained unbroken. It was a battle not just against an enemy, but against the harsh elements and the creeping despair that threatened to consume them. Their story became a testament to unwavering loyalty and indomitable human spirit. The Filipinos adapted their strategies and turned to guerrilla warfare. This became a defining feature of their resistance, allowing them to strike at the heart of the American occupation while evading direct confrontations. Employing hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and sabotage, the Filipino guerrilla forces disrupted American supply lines, targeted key military installations, and demoralized the enemy. They utilized their intimate knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, disappearing into the jungles and mountains when pursued. The Filipino guerrillas, under the leadership of figures like Emilio Aguinaldo and General Gregorio del Pilar, became masters of stealth and surprise. They struck fear into the hearts of their adversaries, showing that even against a superior force, a determined and resourceful resistance could prevail. As the American forces sought to consolidate their power, they brought with them the full force of their military technology. Armed with modern rifles, artillery, and machine guns, they held a significant advantage over the Filipino revolutionaries, whose weaponry was largely outdated and limited in supply. This technological asymmetry proved to be a critical factor in the outcomes of many battles. However, the Filipino revolutionaries, facing the daunting challenge of combating a technologically superior force, had to adapt their tactics to level the playing field. They understood that traditional methods of warfare would not be sufficient to secure victory. Thus, they turned to guerrilla warfare and unconventional strategies to counter the American might. The geography of the Philippine Islands played a crucial role in shaping the tactics employed by the revolutionaries. The dense jungles, rugged mountain ranges, and intricate cave systems became their allies in the fight against the occupying forces. They utilized the natural terrain to their advantage, employing hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and swift retreats. The strategies and tactics employed by both sides in the Philippine-American War were a reflection of the dire circumstances they faced. On both sides of the conflict, a carefully crafted narrative unfolded, each vying for dominance in the theater of minds. The American forces, seeking to justify their presence and actions, employed a sophisticated propaganda machine. Through newspapers and pamphlets, they painted a picture of benevolent intervention, highlighting their mission to civilize and uplift the Filipino people. But as the war unfolded, controversies began to emerge, exposing the grim truth of this narrative. One such controversy was the practice of waterboarding, a form of torture employed by the American forces to extract information from captured revolutionaries. The establishment of reconcentration camps, where Filipino civilians were forcibly relocated into overcrowded and unsanitary conditions. These camps, intended to quell support for the revolutionaries, instead became breeding grounds for disease, starvation, and death. On the Filipino side, revolutionaries, led by figures such as Emilio Aguinaldo, recognized the power of media and propaganda in mobilizing support for their cause. They utilized newspapers, pamphlets, and speeches to rally the Filipino people and garner international sympathy for their struggle against foreign domination. However, controversies also emerged within the Filipino narrative. The Luzonization policy, implemented by some Filipino leaders, sparked debates and divisions within the revolutionaries' ranks. This policy favored the prioritization of resources and support for the liberation of Luzon, the largest and most strategically important island in the archipelago. Critics argued that this approach neglected other regions and marginalized their respective fights for independence. As the war raged on, the lines between fact and fiction, heroism and brutality, became increasingly blurred, revealing the power of propaganda in shaping the course of history. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the war-torn streets of the Philippines. Once a vibrant and bustling city, it now lay in ruins, a haunting testament to the consequences of war. The echoes of gunfire had long since faded, but the scars it left behind were etched deep into the nation's soul. In the wake of the conflict, the loss of lives was immeasurable. Families torn apart, dreams shattered, and futures erased in an instant. The once thriving communities were reduced to mere shadows of their former selves. Tears mingled with the dust of destruction as loved ones searched desperately for signs of life amidst the rubble. The destruction was pervasive, stretching across cities, towns, and villages. Buildings that once stood tall now crumbled like ancient relics, their broken frames a poignant symbol of the shattered hopes and dreams of the Filipino people. Infrastructure lay in ruins, roads torn asunder, and vital services disrupted. The scars of battle ran deep, leaving behind a landscape of despair. As the smoke cleared, the United States found itself in possession of new territories acquired through the crucible of war. The allure of colonial power beckoned, promising wealth, influence, and a chance to shape the world. But beneath the surface, doubts simmered. The question loomed, what was the true cost of empire? The war had left a bitter taste. The United States realized that true power lay not in territorial conquest, but in the hearts and minds of nations. It began to understand that winning battles on the field did not guarantee victory in the long run. A new generation of leaders emerged, guided by a vision of a better future. They sought to build alliances, foster economic prosperity, and promote democratic values. The scars of the war had served as a harsh reminder that the pursuit of power for power's sake led only to ruin. The war had ignited a fire within the hearts of the Filipino people, a burning desire to break free from the shackles of colonial oppression. For generations, their land had been claimed by foreign powers, their culture subjugated, their aspirations silenced. But now, the tides were turning, and the spirit of independence danced on the horizon. As the struggle for independence raged on, the Filipino nationalists faced not only the physical battles, but also the battle for hearts and minds. They had to break the chains of mental colonization, challenging the notion that they were lesser, unworthy of self-governance. They had to reclaim their history, their identity, and reforge the spirit of Filipino pride. The struggle for independence had become a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of unity and the indomitable spirit of a people. The scars of battle were worn with pride, each mark telling a story of sacrifice and unwavering determination. The struggle for independence had ignited a flame that would burn for eternity, inspiring future leaders and forever shaping the course of Filipino history. Deep within the caverns of history, a forgotten chapter awaits, yearning to be unearthed. A tale of valor, intrigue, and the clash of nations. The Philippine-American War ignited a flame of resistance that would inspire generations to come. It birthed movements, ignited passions, and fueled the fire of self-determination around the globe. From the dusty archives of history, the voices of the oppressed cry out, urging us to listen, to learn, and to challenge the prevailing narratives. They were warriors, revolutionaries in their own right, blazing trails of courage and determination. Today, as the world continues to grapple with issues of national identity, cultural preservation, and self-determination, the lessons gleaned from this forgotten conflict are more relevant than ever. It serves as a stark reminder of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of freedom and the ongoing struggle for equity and justice. Together, let us ensure that history remembers and that we, as custodians of the human experience, never forget.